pandemic, I want to remind everyone to continue to physically distance and wear a mask to protect yourself and others. Because of these unprecedented logistic and public health challenges, we are still following the COVID-19 public comment procedures with regards to participating from the public. Only written public comment will be allowed. Live or in-person comment will not be permitted. Today's agenda rules include no business matters for which there will be a vote taken, but we will adopt the minutes from the previous meeting where no quorum was present. We will accept public comment through the end of the meeting. However, we will not require the customary recess period at the beginning of the meeting. We will adopt those minutes at the end of the meeting to allow time for anyone wishing to provide such comment. Public comment should be submitted electronically using the e-public comment form available at council.nola.gov /meetings. Only complete online forms will be considered. No member of the public may submit more than one written comment per agenda item. And comments will be read aloud in normal speaking pace and voice. The moderator will discontinue reading comment once it exceeds 2 minutes. Any person seeking any sort of accommodation as a result of disability or other circumstance can absolutely contact Council Chief of Staff Paul Harang at paul.harang, HARANG, @nola.gov. Any public comment not read aloud due to time will be made available to the public. We will now read the agenda in its entirety.
Agenda item 1, roll call. Agenda item 2, approval of the minutes of September 10th, 2020. Agenda item 3, approval of the minutes from October 8th, 2020. Agenda item 4, Brianna's motion discussing NLPD reform with no outcomes. Agenda item 5, public safety and ethics hearing. And agenda item 6, adjournment.
Thank you, Nathan. Our first agenda item is a discussion on NOPD reforms with regards to no-knock warrants, also known as Brianna's Law. I see Chief Ferguson on with leadership as well. I want to thank you all for embracing this conversation and really collaborating with Madam Vice President on this piece. Though we have not seen this occur recently in the city of New Orleans, we've seen it around the nation. And I think it's really just sound and prudent that we be proactive in our review of our local policies and procedures to make sure that we have safeguards in place that can prevent a tragedy such as what happened in Breonna Taylor's case. With us today, we have Deputy Superintendent Othniel Sandifer from the NOPD's Professional Standards and Accountability Bureau to speak to us about how NOPD is updating its warrant policies. I really want to thank Council Vice President Moreno for pushing hard on this issue and working with the department and leadership to strengthen the policy to better protect people and better protect our officers as well. Madam Vice President, why don't you open us up on this agenda item? Commander Albert, welcome. Chief, welcome. It's good talking to you yesterday, and good to see you as well.
Well, good morning to all of you, and good morning, Mr. President, Mr. DA-elect. It's good to see you this morning as well. Mr. President, as you mentioned, what we're trying to do here is to try to prevent the type of tragedy that happened in Louisville, Kentucky with Breonna Taylor. So at the end of the day, what we'd like to prevent is the use of no-knock warrants here in New Orleans. So just so that the people of the city understand how we got to this point is a couple months ago, the city council passed a resolution, unanimous resolution by all of us, urging the department to come up with a policy dealing with no-knock warrants. And at the end of the day, they've really through just based on what I've read and really updated and revised their overall search warrant policy. So Chief Sandifer and Chief Ferguson, I thank you so much for your work on this. We've been back and forth with different emails. I've also been talking with a variety of different advocates, some local and some national, who have also reviewed the policy. And I'll also say this, that our own analyst, Jeff Asher, has taken a look at different policies from different departments. And he's going to also show us a comparison as to how the NOPD policy stacks up to other cities that have passed no-knock policies as well. So, I mean, I think first we should definitely have whoever's presenting from NOPD. I don't know if it's you, if it's you, Chief Sandifer, or you, Chief Ferguson, who wants to kick it off, to kind of explain the changes that have been made and how these changes could work to prevent no-knock warrants. And then from there, I suggest we turn it over to Jeff Asher to show kind of the comparison as to how this policy stacks up with the different cities. So with that, I'll turn it over to whoever from NOPD would like to kick it off. Chief Ferguson?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Chief.
I'd just like to start again by acknowledging who I have with me. I have Deputy Chief Superintendent over Professional Standards and Accountability, Ota Sandiford, and I have Captain Darrell Albert, who's over our Special Operations Division. Chief Sandiford is prepared to speak about the policy in itself and how it was updated. And Captain Albert is prepared to answer any questions on the practical side, if there are any as well. What I would like to see for the record for everyone is, first of all, just thank Council Member Vice President Moreno for this opportunity and allowing us to be a part of this conversation. You know, this climate, this year has been a very unusual year, and it has given us as a profession an opportunity to look at things and what we're doing and what can we do differently. Just as we work with Councilmember President Williams as well as Councilmember Banks on the tear gas ordinance and the uses of those various resources, this gives us another opportunity to do things more efficiently and provide a better service to our community in which we are serving. So we look forward to this conversation. And I would like to just say for the record, in talking to my team in itself, you know, we're not proponents for no-knock warrants per se. It is, just as we looked at tear gas, a tool in the toolbox to have when necessary. But our position is we don't ever want to use a no-knock warrant. We have not used them in years. We do not plan on using them, only in very exigent circumstances. Special operations is known as SWAT. Sit, wait, and talk is what we really call it. We want to sit and be patient so that everyone is safe, the community in which we serve as well as our officers. So we try to do our due diligence and gather as much intelligence and information that we can prior to engaging on these type of operations. So with that being said, I ask Chief Sandiford to elaborate more on the policy update in itself. And again, myself and Captain Albert are here to respond to any questions on the practical side of it all.
Thank you, Superintendent Ferguson, and thank you all again for allowing us the opportunity to present before you, Councilman Moreno, for your office and your guidance for this particular policy and elect. Thank you. So for our no-knock policy, we did in fact want to revisit it and take a long, hard look at how we would approach this. And so basically, we wanted to ensure that absent any potentially danger, the no-knock warrant would not be executed. So as a department, we recognize the inherent and potentially dangers that these warrants actually present to subjects, to bystanders, as well as to the officers. And so we're committed to preserving the sanctity of human life and preventing any harm as much as possible. When we started to map out how we wanted to approach our policy. And so we recognize that the ongoing national attention that the no-knock warrant policy presents for itself, especially with Breonna Taylor. And so as a last resort, and only as a last resort, that we have mapped out in our policy that a no-knock warrant would actually be executed. And the officers, whoever applies for this warrant, must and will state articulable facts and circumstances surrounding these exigent circumstances, and it will be reviewed by a supervisor. And prior to executing a no-knock warrant, the officers are required to reassess before entry. And so that's pretty much in a nutshell. But if you look at the policy in and of itself, I'm sorry, say again. Hello?
Can't hear you, Council Vice. There you go.
Okay, perfect. Chief, just to stop you for 1 second, explain to me what a verifiable exigent circumstance could be.
It would be, for instance, let's say an individual who had been kidnapped, and the officers have facts and circumstances surrounding an incident that if they did announce themselves prior to making entry into the house, that this particular individual will actually be harmed. That's just one example.
Could also, this type of circumstance be because there's first it's on the, they have to list this as part of, trying to get this warrant accepted. But if they arrive on the scene, there's also, to be some type of, if there's not going to be if there's not going to be an announcement that police are coming in, there also has to be an exigent circumstance. So could something like where, they could hear somebody, I don't know, shoot off a round, or,
Yes.
Say I'm gonna, kill you or something like that. Is that another type of exigent circumstance when they're actually at the scene?
Yes, if you hear shots fired, that could be a potential circumstance. Also, the officers have facts and circumstances around it that the individual within this particular area has known to have been violent and have armed themselves previously to cause harm to either a subject that's within the residence or cause harm to the police officers themselves. I think Captain Elwood may have a little bit more experience with these particular incidents as well.
So, good morning. This is Captain Elwood. And just to go along with what Chief Sanders said, just to kind of give you a little background, in my 30 plus years here with the New Orleans Police Department, with more than 13 being in the Special Operations Division, I've been present and involved in quite a few search warrant executions. So I know we take a good hard look at it, and this is a great opportunity to look at and examine our policies. And I'm very happy with the product that Chief Sanders' team and my team came up with as a result of trying to make the best possible policy out there. And so with that, there are some exigent circumstances. For instance, one of the things we do once we receive that warrant from the field for an execution of a warrant is that we do a risk assessment. And that's a document that we have. It's basically a serious checklist of things that raise the risk of executing. For instance, I'll just go over a couple. Some of the things that we need to know, of course, are the kids or elderly person. We need to know that if the subject that we're looking for have a military background or police background, if they booby trap the residents, or anything like that, things like that would heighten or hamper entry. But I'll tell you, in my experience, like I said, with over 13 years in special operations, over 30 years on the police department, I do not recall us executing a no-knock warrant. I do not recall us executing a no-knock warrant. We do have no-knock warrants, but we do believe in announcing ourselves prior to entry. That's just a smart way of doing it for us. Again, I've been present on so many of them. The announcements are loud. They're multiple. It's as we move it throughout the residence or the business, we're constantly announcing. It's not just an announcement at the door and that's it. As we move through the location, we're constantly announcing. In the event someone's at a location near the back of the residence or the back of the business, we constantly announce. We believe in that. It's proven to be very successful for us. So to go from a no-knock, to go up to escalate to a no-knock, there would have to be an immediate assessment on the scene with supervisors. This is not going to be a decision that's just an operator, an officer on the scene is going to make that call. We're going to give a hard look at it. We're going to assess it. What's the benefits to it? What's the pros and cons before we allow a no-knock warrant to be executed. Again, in all the years that I've been involved in it, we have not executed any no-knocks. We've had no-knock warrants, but we've not executed as no-knocks. I think the best thing is to announce as we make an entry.
And Captain Albert, I didn't see it in the policy, but something that we could add, and I've seen it in some other policies in other parts of the state, is that for execution of warrants, when police are announcing themselves, there's a specific amount of time before they enter. Some have it at 15 seconds, others have it at 30 seconds. When you say that you announce at the door, what does that look like now? And is there something we can put into the policy?
Well, it depends when we talk about times. If it's just a door and no other obstruction, we'll make the announcement once, twice, 3 times. It's not a specific second time limit. But if that door is fortified, for instance, with iron bars, we see multiple lots. Our intelligence tells us that it's going to be harder to gain entry. We'll make an announcement, and then to go along with the announcement is what you hear from the officers trying to make entry, the RAM, the pry tools, and all those other things that's going to be being used to try to get entry. But if it's just a simple door, we'll make the announcement multiple times, and then we'll go ahead and make entry. But again, if it's fortified, it's going to take a little bit longer. And that does give the occupants more time to know that the police are outside.
Yeah, that would be the only thing that I would just, maybe circle back and consider, just because I've seen it in other policies from police departments across the country, that they put an actual, time. Like I said, some are 15 seconds, some are 30 seconds. So I would just, I'm sure you all have contacts with all types of police departments across the country, but I'm just wondering why they decided that a specific, amount of time was necessary before entering. So I would ask that you all look at that. What about this too, as you are, because the other thing I didn't see on the in the policy is, I get it that you have to do that, you're going, you want to identify yourself that the police are outside and that you're going to make entry, right? But are police identifying themselves in another way, as like wearing a uniform or having a badge? Like, are there any type of other identifiable, requirements for police? Because that was another thing that advocates brought up to me in this policy, that seems to be missing as well.
We wear uniform. The only uniform we're into is, and you're saying you don't see anything stating that specifically. Is that what you're saying, Councilman Member? I'm sorry.
Right, that's correct.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, that sounds like an easy fix, because when we're executing warrants, those types of warrants, if we have to, it would definitely have to be a uniform. And to go back to, I know in the policy, to go back to what you were saying previously, I know we have in there that we will wait. I just want to be clear. You're asking us to specify a time, whether it be 15 seconds or 30 seconds. What would that time frame be? Because we do have that we will wait, but you're asking that we identify a time that we can state specifically within the warrant.
Yes, sir. Just to identify if that could be, I'm seeing it in other policies, just wondering if that is it seems to be some type of best practice that advocates are supporting. And so just something for you all to look at to see if that would be something productive for this policy as well.
Absolutely. We could look into that and identify what are the best practices. But from a tactical standpoint, I know also that could easily switch. So we're going to be careful with our verbiage and our wording in that, because while we're saying we're waiting, we're going to wait 30 seconds. If something happens within that 30 seconds, of course, they're going to have to switch out. So we'll make sure we look into that as well. Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm. I think those are all the questions I have for right now.
I just had one question, and I think Captain Albert was addressing it. I was trying to think back to the last issue. Can you think of the last issue we had like this in Orleans Parish? Not that resulted in a death, but resulted in any shots fired or anything like that? Captain Albert, or
I was trying to unmute. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've executed quite a few search warrants. One of the things I know that's changed over in recent years is that now the Special Operations Division is responsible for executing those warrants. In the past, we had district task forces and narcotics units executing warrants, and that may not have been the best practice. I know now with the Special Operations Division, with our training, with our equipment, with our constant execution of these warrants, we've gotten much better than ever before. So yeah, they've had some incidents, and that resulted in the Special Operations Division taking lead on executing warrants. So again, we're happy that it's in-house. We have the training, the knowledge, the expertise, and the equipment, and that's where it needs to be. So where in the past you had, officers with minimal training executing warrants, that's the past. We've moved on from there.
Thank you. And Commander Sandifer or Chief Ferguson, just wanted to check in with regards to whether or not Judge Morgan or any of the federal monitors weighed in. I would imagine this would be something that would be very helpful in terms of, well, I would imagine this would be something that they would be very encouraging of, but I'd like to just hear from y'all on that.
Yeah, sure. I can speak to that. And so both the federal monitors as well as the Department of Justice have weighed in on our no-knock warrant policy. And so we've had a lot of discussions and back and forth. And so that's how we have come to this stage within the policy, weigh in from both the Department of Justice as well as the federal monitors. And so just recently they commended us for adding in all of the nuances to prevent these no-knock warrant policies for being executed unless exigent circumstances actually occur and as a last resort.
Thank you. Council Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. President. And my other question that I forgot to ask is about, obviously I know that NOPD has the body cams, but I do think it would be important to put into this policy that there are body cam requirements. I've seen in other policies where, they're required to put on their body cams 5 minutes before and keep them on, 5 minutes afterwards.
Yes, ma'am. We have that built into the policy that the body cameras must remain on, activated during the entire search warrant, and shall remain on for any member on the premises of the search. We have that. It's in, if you look at paragraph 4 in the policy.
What page, Chief?
First page on the policy statement. Look at number 4.
And maybe second. I printed mine out, Council, so mine is on the second page, so yours may be on the second page as well.
As with any execution of all search and arrest warrants, all members participating in the execution of a no-knock warrant shall activate the BWC prior to and during the entire duration of the search. The BWC shall remain activated.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. For some reason, the copy that I have does not have it.
I will send you over
the latest. That would be great. Because, yeah, my number 4 doesn't seem to have. There it is. Okay. Shall remain activated during the entire. Yep, I see it now. No, that's perfect. I just think that piece is incredibly important, particularly since we're talking about should something go wrong, these exigent circumstances. I mean, there must be, documentation, video footage to show why this was the last resort and did have to happen. Because I have to tell you, I mean, the whole reason why I wanted to push this, I mean, I was looking for, to tell you the truth, I was looking for an all-out ban, a prohibition, just like Louisville did. But I've also been made aware that there are other cities that have gone, more this route to do all possible to try to prevent no knocks from happening, and that some of these national advocacy groups have been satisfied with some of those updates. Look, in my opinion, I think that the data shows that these are incredibly dangerous and that we should ban outright. You, though, are the law enforcement leaders in this city. You know, you all are the ones who are out in the field. So I would just, you know, coming from me, I would want you to go and push as much as possible. And I know that you've already stated that you are, to never execute a no-knock warrant in the city. That's just, you know, my view, and just based on all the research and data that I've seen. And, you know, we've talked about this many times before, just about not only the danger that it puts to those who are inside the particular building or home that you are trying to enter, but to the danger that it puts to police officers as well, to all parties involved when no knocks are executed. So, you know, I would just ask that we go as far as possible to you know, ban, and maybe that's what we work toward. But, you know, I do appreciate all the work that has been put into this, and some of the different changes that have been made based on conversations that we've had.
Commander, just following up on that same language you were just reading, does it state a specific time, whether it's minutes prior to executing dynamic entry, or does it state when the officers leave the car? What is there any specificity with regards to when the camera gets turned on?
No, sir, there isn't the time, but we do have in there the prior to the entry, and it remains on during the entire duration of that particular execution of the warrant.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further questions from the dais, Madam Vice President, does that conclude your questions for, thank you.
It does. Questions, and of course, Mr. President, Jeff Asher is on standby to show the comparison of this policy to those of other cities.
Jeff, would you want to jump on and do that now before we get into the year-end report, so it's congruent with the testimony of the Chief, Commander, and the Captain?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay. Let me find the slide. There we go. Can you all see this?
Yes, thank you, Jeff.
Okay, so Councilmember Moreno just asked me to go through available policies, legislations, changes to no-knock policies in various cities. There have been a ton of different updates. Some of those are publicly available. Some of those are not yet publicly available. Obviously, NOPD is a leader in public availability of their data and their entire policy manual. So it makes it easy to find these types of things typically. And presumably this will continue to be the case as this policy comes into effect. We found 4 different cities that have updated their no-knock policies. They're from fairly different means, some through legislation, such as in Louisville. Houston passed an executive order which necessitated the police department to update its policy. I have the executive order, but I don't think the policy itself is publicly available. San Antonio updated the policy itself, much like NOPD has done. And I believe Minneapolis has a very similar policy to what we're seeing with NOPD that came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. So there's lots of other potential examples that are out there. These are just a couple that I was able to pull. In the overall comparison, you can see NOPD's policy here with the important parts bolded and in red. No-knock entry is only when the no-knock entry is immediately necessary to prevent an imminent threat of harm to a person. And these are types of search warrants are prohibited absent clear facts and circumstances establishing that the officers or another person would be harmed unless they made an immediate unannounced entry. Louisville and San Antonio have gone further towards what Councilmember Moreno was saying in terms of just completely banning them. As you can see, the Louisville legislation says that there's no officer that can do a no-knock warrant. Straight up says that you can't do it within the boundaries of Jefferson County. San Antonio is similarly clear that members of the police department are prohibited for applying for or participating in the service of a no-knock warrant. Houston's is a ban, but a little bit more permissive in that police officers are prohibited from executing a no-knock warrant without the written approval of the chief or the chief's designee. And so right now you just require the district court judge to assign it. But in Houston, you need both the senior leadership approval and the signature of the judge as well. And so that is Houston's executive order. The exceptional circumstances, Louisville and Houston, you can see there's no text saying here the circumstances in which you can enter. In New Orleans, as we discussed earlier, when a compelling reason exists, they can either request it or if they have reasonable suspicion that the potentially lethal risk of entering unannounced are outweighed by the risk of not entering, basically they need to as a last resort, they can do it. San Antonio's actually addresses this issue, but basically says that if they have a suspicion that that announcing would put the officers or the citizens within danger, that they need to leave. That the service of the search warrant shall be delayed until such time officers can safely perform the requirement to knock and announce their identity. So in this case, banning the no-knock warrant in San Antonio and addressing the issue of, well, what if it announcing might put people in danger? Well, then you need to not do it at all, is what the San Antonio policy says. And then the body cameras, which I think was discussed earlier, but in New Orleans, there's the discussion of having the body camera prior to and during the execution. Louisville goes a little bit further, just in saying that no later than 5 minutes prior to it, but very similar in terms of must activate the recording and keep it on the entire time until 5 minutes after. So just a little bit more specific. San Antonio doesn't say anything about it, and Houston's policy or Houston's executive order, excuse me, says that the body cameras will be used by all officers, but doesn't specify how often, long before or after it needs to stay on. So those were the examples of the cities. As you can see, a fairly wide variety of cities and a wide variety of approaching it, and that they have addressed this in several different ways, but many of the same different issues being addressed by many cities throughout the country.
And I think Jeff noted that there are states who are passing legislation to ban outright no-knocks, including I believe the state of Virginia was the most recent one to ban them, and I believe there's also federal legislation on this matter as well to ban no-knocks. I mean, I'll just say this, I definitely think that this is certainly a step in the right direction to, very, very, very narrowly limit no-knocks in the city. But I would still like to push toward a full ban, and maybe we can work toward that, Chief. As you saw, some other cities have been able to implement that, including San Antonio, through their own policy. So I would just say, let's continue the work on this, Chief, if that's okay, as we keep that. Like I said, certainly a step in the right direction. But if we could just keep looking at what other cities are doing, just keep working on this, we can only keep getting better, right? And so if I'd really appreciate that commitment to continue to work on this and see if we can work toward a ban.
Thank you, Council. So you do have my commitment in always looking at ways in which we can do things differently, do things better, provide a better service as public servants of our community. What I caution everyone, I ask everyone to be cautious of is let's not overreact. We've laid the foundation, in my opinion, right now with this policy. Let's continue to build on it as necessary, but do not overreact. Do not put ourselves in a box and find ourselves facing a situation where we aren't able to respond when necessary. So I think we are moving in the right direction right now. If something were to occur and something should happen, that we would have to take another look at this, and of course, improve it if necessary. Of course, we are always willing to have those conversations. As technology evolves, policies, protocols should evolve. And that is what we're willing to do every step of the way. We are always open to these types of conversations. So thank you again for this opportunity to give us the platform to explain what our position is with this and being open to what our position has been throughout this process.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Commander Sanders. I'm sorry, Madam Vice President, that cut you off.
IT problems, yeah. Chief, I just wanted to say I'm certainly not overreacting in any way. I'm just trying to make sure that we have the absolute best policy for the people of this city, and that is my here. And I don't want anything to happen so that we have to change this policy. I want to get it as right as possible now, so that nothing happens. So that's where I'm coming from, is that we, continue to reach out to other departments, other cities, say, why did you come up with this scenario for you? Why did you decide an all-out ban was the right thing? And, maybe there's an opportunity to learn from other departments, and through that learning, we can continue to move this policy forward.
Chief, I wanted to ask you one thing on that last slide, and I don't know if Commander Sandifer, you might have some comment on it too. The last slide Jeff put up showed the 5-minute requirement for turning the camera on in Louisville. I wondered if you all had thought about that, had comments about that. If not, I would ask that you explore it, only for the reason that I know a lot of times in situations like this, it's a fluid situation that can change very, very quickly. And I would hate to have a situation where officers are planning on turning on the body-worn camera, an exigency presents itself, and then it's not on because it was in too close proximity to actual entry. And I'm wondering if that 5-minute requirement might be helpful to one, trigger that at a moment like when officers are in the car and there's no danger to them and no danger to anyone else, so that there isn't that sort of that critical window runs out when it's time because of some factor outside the control of law enforcement. Commander?
No, if I may, Counsel, I think that is very much a valid recommendation. I actually wrote it down when I saw it. I would like to, continue our conversations with the DOJ to identify the best practices, 3 to 5 minutes or what have you. But I think it would be in our best interest to have that, have the body-worn camera activated prior to, just as you said, in the event something happens, we are already ready to prepare to record everything. So yeah, absolutely. We're definitely going to consider that. What that time frame will be, I cannot specifically say right now, but I absolutely want to look into doing identify the specific time prior to entry.
That sounds great, Chief. Commander, did you want to add to that? Yes, sir. You're on mute still.
I wholeheartedly agree. Well, I wrote it down as well, but not only prior to, but after as well. The conclusion of the execution of the search warrant, to have it on X amount of minutes afterwards, just in case something else actually occurs. But I will defer and get in talks with the DOJ as well as Captain Albert to get his expertise on this as well.
Thank you all very much for.
I'll add to that. So the way it's done now, and of course we want to put that in writing, is that as the officers get together and they're staging, and they're reviewing the plan and they're getting in their formations, everyone checks each other to ensure that their camera is on. So prior to walking up towards that structure, everyone is confirmed that their camera is running. And then same thing when the event is over. So yeah, we'll put that in documented in some form as part of the policy. But I can assure you, we get together as a group when we're forming up prior to approaching the structure, and we check each other to ensure that those cameras are up.
Thank you all for further researching that. I think that could be a real game changer in terms of evidence collected, evidence that can show good work and just really protect everybody. I think Councilmember Banks has been trying to get in here. Councilmember Banks, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. I just wanted to say to the chief and to his team that I appreciate your diligence and intentional efforts to try to come up with a median. Now, the reality of it is that the majority of our police officers are good folks. The majority of the police officers work very hard and try to do their jobs to keep the rest of us safe. But in some instances, police have gone way off the rails, and those instances ought to be outlawed and dealt with. On the other hand, the majority of our citizens are very good people who would never encounter the police in a negative way. But there are some bad people out there that need to be dealt with, and dealt with in a way that gets them out of society. Now, there's a median somewhere between those two sides, and that median, I think, is what you all have been intentionally working towards. We definitely do need to have reforms as relates to the entire system, and we definitely need to have safeguards to ensure that police don't go overboard. But we also do not need to limit the ability of the police to keep us safe when we do encounter some of those very bad people. So at the end of the day, I want to say thank you to you all for having the fortitude and the integrity to be able to work towards that median. Now, there are other police departments and other places that have fought these types of reforms and these types of changes. And it's a good thing to be in New Orleans because you all have not been adversarial, from tear gas to this, and I'm sure that there are going to be others. You all have worked hand in hand with us to try to get to that median where you all have the tools necessary to be able to keep us safe, but also have the tools necessary to be able to act when it's necessary. So with that, Chief, I wanted to say publicly, thank you for your team. And also to you, Council President, I haven't had the chance to speak to you yet. I wanted to publicly say congratulations. The election was very interesting. I learned a lot of stuff that I did not know, but I know now. But at the end of the day, man, I want to say to you that I am committed to doing whatever I can do to help you be successful as the district attorney. If the district attorney is successful, the whole city will be successful. So you have my public commitment to be able to do whatever I can do to help you in that quest to make New Orleans as best as it can be. So with that, thanks to both of you all.
Thank you, Councilmember Banks. I really appreciate that. And Chief, thank you. Councilmember Banks is absolutely right. Just as we said, as we were talking yesterday, I look forward to working with you in my new capacity. And I hope that we can make that relationship stronger and closer than it's ever been in this city. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We will now call Jeff Asher back up for the public safety year-end report. Jeff has done a really good job of keeping the council and community level set on where our crime numbers actually are and how the lockdown and pandemic has impacted our courts and jail population. We know that these are anomalous times and things have not been anywhere close to normal, but I think there's still a whole lot to learn from those crime trends and the types of crimes we are seeing during this unprecedented time, and how efficiently we can work system change to improve public safety. Jeff, thank you for being with us again, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure to be presenting in front of the council once more. This has certainly been a historic year, an unprecedented year, not necessarily historic in the good sense, but that has carried over into the crime trends that we are seeing. Most of this data is publicly available on the City Council's website. Under the Criminal Justice Committee's page, we have the series of dashboards. Most of this data is just pulled straight from there. So if people are interested, you can see the numbers and you can see how they change and where a lot of this analysis is coming from. Overall crime, when we talk about crime, UCR Part 1 major offenses is down 9.5% this year relative to 2019 when I pulled the data in about a week ago. Property crime is down 13.5%, and because the majority of all crime is property crime and most of that is theft, we've seen a huge decrease in crime year on year. This is comparing year-to-date 2020 with year-to-date 2019. But violent crime, assault, rape, robbery, and murder is up 15.5% relative to this point last year. And murder is actually up 68%. That has changed a little bit because we had a surge in murder in December 2019. So now it's up 60%. That's a distinction without a difference at this point. It's still up significantly in New Orleans. You can see the numbers. Things like shoplifting are down. Pickpocket was up something like 400% and has fallen significantly simply because nobody's on Bourbon Street to get pickpocketed. It's still up slightly, but that really reflects Mardi Gras. So crimes that rely on people to be out and about and doing things and shopping, those types of crimes are generally down and reflect mobility in the city. Whereas crimes that are less random may be more driven by economic or health or mental health conditions. Those types of crimes are up. And we talk about murder being up 60%. Both with a firearm is up and without a firearm is up double. Now, those are low incidence, low base rate crimes. So that could reflect some sort of legitimate change, or it could just reflect the fact that these are crimes that are relatively rare. And when you have random fluctuations, sometimes they're going to be up by big percentage points. Here is mostly that table in graphical form, just to show you the percent change of each type of crime. Carjackings are up. Again, another crime that's a relatively low base rate crime. When you combine carjackings with armed robberies and simple robberies into the robbery category, robberies are actually down. So we've seen a decrease in robbery, but it's been simple robberies, which you would imagine are things like purse snatchings that really require people to be out and about, are down. Armed robberies are about even, and carjackings are up significantly. You're only talking 200 versus 100. So relative to the number of thefts citywide, it's still a relatively small number of incidents. Gun violence is the thing that I think, and rightly so, we should be focusing on. You can sort of make it out here towards that line of 2020. There was a jump in gun violence, and things kind of slowed down in January, February, March, April timeframe. And when the pandemic really started to hit, they started to pick back up. And we've seen two different periods. One in the June, July, August timeframe of an increase, and then another big surge that began in October and November. They have plateaued or come down slightly, but as this chart shows, gun violence, this is shooting incidents rolling over 90 days. Gun violence is as high or higher now than any time since we have data to collect for. So we're seeing more shootings. We're approaching almost 2 shootings a day for 90 days.
Jeff, really, one question on shootings. Are we tracking shootings, and how are we tracking shootings when no one is struck?
So we don't track that systemically just because it's going to be so underreported. So in this case, these are incidents where somebody, both non-fatal and fatal, where somebody was actually hit.
Is there any technology that can help us start to track shootings? And I ask that question because if one human being is shooting at another human being, whether or not they are a good shot or not, or someone ducks or not, still factors into how safe our communities are. So is there technology that we could put in place that could help us actually not just look at the number of times a person is killed or shot, but the number of times that people are shooting at each other in our communities?
Absolutely. There's antennas that you can install. It's a system called ShotSpotter that has been done in a lot of cities. The challenge is that one, it's difficult to get the entire city. So you're probably looking at only the parts where you have the most gun violence is where these things tend to get installed relative to the rest of the city where, there's parts of the city where there's a lot of land, but you're not going to see necessarily a lot of people or a lot of gun violence. The other issue is that it can be an overwhelming amount of gun violence. I've seen things like 10 to 20 times for every shooting where you actually have somebody hit, you're looking at 10 to 20 times the number of gun violence incidents. The technology has come a long way. I think right after Katrina, it was tried in New Orleans, and they had issues with the topography of the city, and the technology wasn't very mature. It's come a long way, and they do a much better job of filtering out things like cars backfiring or fireworks. But it's a type of thing that can give you a better understanding of the amount of gun violence if you can actually handle knowing exactly how much there's out there.
Okay. And one other last thing in terms of carving out certain crimes or types of crimes. On the list you were showing us before about what crimes are trending up, is there a way to carve out domestic violence specifically? And I know I see the categories that it would probably fall under, but given the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm just wondering about those numbers specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. And because we're using calls for service data here. So NOPD has a aggravated assault call type that's both domestic and non-domestic. For UCR purposes, those are lumped together, but we're going to be putting together a year-end report. And so we can be sure to call out the domestic incidents versus the non-domestic incidents. NOPD's calls for service is great for that because they have simple burglaries that are domestic. They have all types of different incidents that are both extortions that are both domestic and non-domestic. So there's lots of ways to show changes in domestic violence.
Thank you.
So you saw the year-to-date percent change. It partially reflects last year in that we had 119 murders, which is still, or 120 murders, which is still a horrifically high number of murders, but is also leaps and bounds better than any year we've done since the early 1970s. So there was an expectation that we'd probably see a bounce back to some point, but we're most likely going to see the most murders we've seen here since 2011, 2012. So it also reflects a real rise in gun violence citywide. We've seen more violence here than any point in over a decade. And New Orleans is not alone in this. Many cities throughout the country that are experiencing big jumps in murder and big jumps in gun violence. This is work that I've done nationally to show that murder is up 35% in big cities, in a sample of over 50 big cities that have year-to-date data available. So New Orleans is no different from what we're seeing in New York, in Chicago, in Louisville, in Minneapolis. All over the country, we're seeing big jumps in murder. And it's most likely, at least partially related to a lot of the stresses in the pandemic. So if that's the case, then in theory, as we hopefully all get the vaccine in the next couple of months, knock on wood, and the stresses of the pandemic start to go away, hopefully that's the type of thing that we would see this as a 1 year jump. But there are other causes as well, especially related to issues of police violence, issues of police legitimacy that tend to accompany rises in gun violence. And that's an entirely other issue and a very complex issue. But that's reason to think that maybe this is something that nationally might be around for a little while. So, and might be a little more difficult to root out. So obviously it's a very big issue. It's a very important issue. With COVID, it hasn't inherently been the #1 issue in New Orleans or nationally, but this is something that probably, if this continues into next year, certainly is screaming for some sort of response and some sort of means of successfully addressing it. The incarceration trend, I talked about this in the other times that I briefed the council, but we saw a big drop in the incarceration population in April. And then again in July, we hit the lowest number in since the 70s, since before we have data. And it slowly crept back up over the last couple of months. And it largely reflects the change in arrests, which have sort of crept back up over the last couple of months as well. We just today hit 1,000 for the first time since I think mid-March. So it's something that we're still down from where we've been historically. We're still at a historically low level, but up from where we were in June, July, as that really low level has not been inherently sustainable. Juvenile arrests has been an issue of the council. So here is the chart on the left is the number of juvenile arrests at juvenile courts. This is unique intakes at juvenile court, rolling over 90 days. Those fell early on in January, February, and continued falling throughout the pandemic. They've increased a little bit over the last couple of months, but not quite as much as other parts of other arrests. And as you know, the Raise the Age ordinance went into effect first in 2019 with property crimes, and then again in 2020 with all crimes. At mid-year, it went into effect, and you can kind of see the number of children under 18 on the right. This chart on the right is the number of children that were under 18 that were arrested in New Orleans over 90 days. And I included this going back the last 20 years just to show the pre-Katrina trend of 1,000+ kids every 3 months being arrested, which is just mind-boggling right now. And you can see the big drop after Katrina. It picked up and then has slowly fallen since 2010. And then at the very end of this chart, you can kind of see it merge with zero. And that is this summer coming into effect and raise the age, where over the last 90 days, there have been 0 children arrested as adults, which doesn't mean that they can't be transferred by the DA's office. But these are arrests that are now showing up in juvenile court. And so these are not cases that are being handled in the adult system, at least on the outset, which shows the successful implementation of raise the age here. And then this is a pie chart that I created last year and wanted to create again this year. You can see this is the adult percentage of arrests that were adult. It's about 94%, with 6% being juveniles, which is the exact same percentage that we had last year and have had pretty much every year. So even though we've had the pandemic, even though there's been rises in certain crimes like car burglaries that tend to be more juvenile focused in terms of the perpetrators that we know, we're still not seeing any change in the pattern of arrests. We're generally seeing, for every 100 people that are arrested, 94 of them are adults and 6 of them are juveniles, with 1 of those juveniles having a violent offense and 5 of those juveniles having a non-violent offense. Finally, issue near and dear to my heart is the availability of data. I mentioned earlier in the meeting how much I appreciate NOPD being a leader in open data. It's become a little bit less of a leader since the cyber attack 1 year ago. There have been several data streams that the department has worked back up to get rolling, especially calls to service, which feeds directly into our crime data dashboard and is basically our ability to evaluate crime data on a daily metric. Traffic camera citations comes from an outside consultant, an outside company. So that's provided sort of in one big lump. The last one we got was in November. NOPD very recently updated its use of force and misconduct complaints data sources, but has not updated its stop and search data source, which is those 3 make up the consent decree dashboard that we have on the council website. So that dashboard has not been updated in a year. And then other types of data, the EPR data has been useful for certain types of analyses. That hasn't been updated since December 2019. And then the body camera metadata and in-car camera metadata, which are very wonky data sets. They're not inherently of use to, I think, a ton of people. You can probably count on 2 hands the number of people since they went up that have used those data sets, but they still haven't been updated since in over a year, both of them. And then NOPD used to have a handful of really excellent dashboards. Its Max dashboard, which was a dashboard for understanding all sorts of different issues, from crime totals per district, from DA acceptance rate of cases, to the officers that were serving and number of officers that were serving in each unit. That has not been updated. NOPD had a demographics dashboard, which allowed people, and I found very important, for tracking NOPD size over time. That hasn't been updated. They have a handful of other crime over time and calls for service analysis dashboard. And then their UCR dashboard, which is where they publish their quarterly crime stats. That hasn't been updated in a year. So while we can use calls for service to estimate crime trends, the UCR numbers are the official formal numbers that NOPD produces, and we haven't seen those in over a year. So these are things that if I were the data czar of the city, I would love to see these back and up. The main one, being calls for service, that's up is great, and I'm appreciative that that's up. But these are things that, as we sort of get back to normal, it would be great to have these availabilities return to normal. So that concludes my presentation of our current trends. Pending any questions.
Jeff, I had one question. When you were talking about juveniles, I know a portion of your focus was where they were incarcerated. But I wanted to see if we could talk about the trends as it relates to the end of the year and this sort of COVID remote learning, whether or not truancy has played any role. How does end of this year compare to end of last year in terms of just juvenile arrest for anything?
It's down relative to the end of last year. And I think that it largely reflects vehicle burglaries being down. Last year, December, January, we saw this huge surge in vehicle burglaries, and that sort of stopped a little bit before the pandemic and then increased even more. Half the people that are arrested for vehicle burglaries are juveniles, and a third of all juvenile intakes are for vehicle burglary offenses. So with a decrease in vehicle burglaries, we're going to see a decrease in juvenile arrests. So that's pretty much what we've seen. We don't see a ton of truancy arrests or things like that. So I haven't specifically looked at that, but that's something that we could look at for the year-end report.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much. I don't see any other questions from the dais. Seeing none, I would thank you for the end of year report, and thank you for making us smarter throughout the year on our criminal justice and public safety efforts, Jeff. I think now we'll switch to public comment. I'll ask Micah Ince to take over my chair to read those.
First comment, Leslie Stanley. No-knock warrants are dangerous and cost lives. We need to push forward from not only banning these, but addressing other police behaviors and policies that are equally dangerous. Breonna's law is important, but when will we hear of further reforms to the criminal justice system? Hunter Phillips. I believe that banning no-knock warrants is going to remove a tool from officers just to police the public and will not actually help people. Instead, I propose that no-knock warrants should have stricter guidelines for execution. The house under investigation must have a lookout or cameras for the use of a no-knock warrant to even be thought of, as well as having all officers in full uniform with working body cameras. They must announce themselves as police once the door is being hit and must give clear commands to people in the house. As we've seen in the Wendell Allen case, officers have lied about giving commands before firing, only to be found out they were lying because a monitor's record of a video that recorded no such commands. To protect against the lies of those who don't follow procedure, there should be a minimum jail sentence for officers who lie about what happened. Firing or resigning officers is not enough, whereas being put in jail and or banned from policing in any state is more acceptable terms. No-knock warrants are tools that have been misused in the past and the public will not stand for. However, it can still be a useful tool that should have stricter guidelines in order to protect the people of New Orleans. These guidelines will also help to protect officers as long as they follow procedures put in place. Raymond Sweet. If we had a better economic empowerment agenda, then no-knock warrants or any warrants would not be necessary. What we really need is to defund the police, fund the people. We need a better, stronger school system. We need better opportunities considering they are doing all of this recruitment for police. What are they doing with the money for the vacancies? Defunding the police and creating healthy communities with healthy economic opportunities, strong academic programs, and a true restorative justice approach to harm in the community makes all these no-knock warrant conversations unnecessary. Those are all the public comments.
Can we adopt this? Thank you, Micah. I'm not sure if we still have a quorum to adopt the minutes from last meeting. Do we? Let's see here. We do. I would move to adopt the minutes.
Second.
Seconded by Council Vice President. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have 4 votes to adopt, no nays. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
For both. Yeah. So moved by Councilmember Banks. Second. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.